I think you can. We are trying to explain same thing what we discussed yesterday today. Is it audible to you, to all of you, right?
Yeah. So it's audible.
Maybe if you don't feel bored, just keep listening again. Okay.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Right. Now, I think we started recording. That's fine. Now let's get to the topic. Okay. And the topic today we discuss is we are jumping to classes and objects. I know yesterday I missed out the timeline. Sorry for that because I had something important to take up yesterday. So that too. So that's why I couldn't start take it in the morning. OOP. Let's start this. Okay. What is OOP? This is very important. This is the basic and foundation for, excuse me, object oriented programming. Okay. What is object oriented programming? Definitely you will have a better this thing here. See, like any, if you talk about OOP, object oriented, like any other this thing, like suppose if you see a special car or some supercar, it has some features like the safety and then the color, the model and the style. We talk about many things. And by looking at that, we can easily say that this is awesome or this is super. When we say something is a sophisticated car or when we say something is a sophisticated thing based on the features, right? Certain it has efficient features or more what will we say? Useful features, very important features. Certain things we call them as what is that super. Similarly in programming, what is it? A language, any language. It might be C, it might be C++, or it might be Java or anything. If a language has these features, this what we call object, class, encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism. If any language has these features, such language is object oriented. You got it? Simple, right? Any language has these features. Then such language is object oriented, friends. That's all. I hope you are clear. So suppose C++ has this feature, so we are calling it object oriented. Even Java has that, C# has that, Python has that. And there are many more OOP languages which we don't know. Smalltalk and Simula 67. There are many more. But we don't need to worry about all other things. But here, this is OOP, any OOP. It's not like this is just limited to Python. This concept of OOP is common for all these OOP languages. It is not just limited for Python. You talk about Java, you talk about C++ or Python or C# or anything you talk, any OOP is same. Any language has these features, then it is object oriented programming. And the core features for any OOP is object and class. Without this, there is nothing we can do in OOP. Without class and object, there is nothing we can do in OOP, object oriented programming. I hope this is clear. So these are core concepts of OOP, right? That took everything starts with object. So we start from object and then again we jump to class. Again we create object for class. Means the source for anything is object. We start from object. And then for that object we implement a class. And then the steps continues. But this is the peak idea. Just remember, we'll talk more on this one by one. And this is OOP. I hope you are clear now. If anybody asks a quick question, what is OOP? Means any language has these features, it is OOP. That's all. I hope you are clear with this, friends. That's the idea. Next one. What is an object? Let's start with understanding each and every feature here. What is object? What is class? Today we focus on object and class and how to create class and object program and how to understand more on these things. Later on, we'll talk about encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. So now I'm starting the core concepts, which is object and class of Python, not Python, any OOP, object-oriented program. Only thing is there will be slight difference in the syntax frames between one language to another language, but the concept of OOP is almost same in almost all languages. I hope this is clear. 1 minute, friends. Yeah, sorry, friends. There is a bit of noise coming from outside. So now let's start with object. What is an object? An object is a real world entity like person, place, or a thing. So that is the general definition. Like, because everything you see and touch is an object. So that means these are just few examples. There are infinite examples for objects. Now, that is the general definition. Now, when we talk about technical definition, what is an object? An object is instance of a class. What do you mean by instance? Instance means memory. Simply speaking, I'll write here. Memory of a class means, in fact, once we create objects allocate memory for a class. So once we create object, just remember, you don't need to understand this. Object allocates memory for a class. So that's what object does. So what is an object? Object is instance or memory of a class. And exactly what object does here is, if we create an object allocates memory for a class. That is the technical definition of object. It is object which allocates memory. So without object, we cannot do anything in most of the OOP programming. Because as name says, object oriented. So object is the core concept or core feature of OOP. I hope this is clear, friends. Right? Next one. When you talk about OOP. So sorry, when you talk about object. So when you init object, you take any object. An object has these two. An object has properties, it has actions. So it has properties and it has actions. Properties means what? Something like this. Suppose you take an example of an object person. Person has name, age, color, height, weight, etc. And those are all what we call properties. Already we are good with Python. Because after doing these many sessions, you are good with many things. Coding wise, you should be familiar now. You can start doing automation now without using OOP because we just started OOP now. Still, you can do the automation. Whatever the topics we have discussed, they are enough for us to start with automation. So now coming to this, properties are simple. They are nothing but just something like name or age or something like this. Color, height, all this. And we declare these properties in a program using variables. And these act as variables. By looking at them, we can easily understand. So that is the quick idea. So that is what properties is. Any object has properties and actions. And what are properties here? Properties are something like name, age, color, height, something like this. These are all properties. And we declare properties in a program using variables. I hope this is clear. Now, actions means what? Actions means something like reading, writing, eating, sleeping. All these are actions. Generally, we implement actions with functions. We already has the familiar with, we are good with functions. We are good with variables. Now, what is that? We just need to understand how to declare them inside a class. That's all. How to use them for object. That's all. How to apply them for object. That's what here we should do now. All other core concepts we are familiar. We are good with variables. We are good with functions. When you know all this, it's nothing to. It's very simple to implement classes and objects. But only thing is we should understand what exactly is class, what exactly is object. That's all. Now you should be very clear with object. Object is something, a real world entity. It's a real world entity which has properties and actions. And generally we declare properties with variables. And properties are something like this. I'm trying to, again, I am repeating again because I just want you to be very clear. And actions are nothing but something read, write, or sleep, or anything. And we implement actions with functions. So this is the simple idea, friends, about an object. And in programming, this is just a general discussion. But when you go to programming, in programming, we should create an object. We should create an object for a class. So the syntax, even object has syntax. We should blindly follow the syntax or memorize syntax. And the syntax of object is this: reference variable equal to class name and then parentheses. So this is the syntax of a class, sorry, object. You should memorize this, that's all. Remember, we'll talk again. Okay, just remember. The syntax of object is this. What is it? Reference variable equal to class name. That's all. And parentheses should be here. One important thing is this is all about object. This is all about object. And one important thing is if we should create object. We are talking about object, right? What is an object? It has properties and actions. That is fine. If it has our properties and actions, where do we declare these properties and actions? That is the question. So the question is, if object has properties and actions. Question is, where do we declare properties and actions? I'm trying to be very clear. If you still have any questions, you can ask. The question is, where do we declare properties and actions of an object? That is the question. Answer is, for that, what we need here? We need a class for that. We use a class to declare all this, to declare properties and actions of an object. So that's all, of an object. So what is that we need here? Before object, what we need here is we need a class first. So if you should construct object, before that what must exist? A class must exist, because class is a blueprint which talks about object. Which talks about object. If we should create object, before that we should have a class. So all that properties of object and actions of object, all this stuff. Excuse me, friends. We have to declare inside a class. What is that we should do, friends? We should declare inside a class. I hope this is clear for all of you. So point is simple. If we should create object, before that class must exist. Why class must exist? Because it is the class which describes about properties and actions of an object. So that's why before we create an object, a class must exist, because it is the class which describes about object. So that is the general definition. But if you talk about technical definition, class is what? What will be there inside class? It has variables of class, methods of class, or functions of object. Sorry. Class has variables of object and methods of object. Sorry, right. So what is a class? All that variables of object, these things, we declare inside a class. All these methods of object, we declare inside a class. So what is a class here? Technically speaking, a class is something which has variables and methods declared. And these variables and methods describes about object, about properties of object and functions of object. So that is another technical definition. And we can also call class as a blueprint of an object, because why we call this as blueprint? Because it is the class which describes about object. So that's why we call this as a blueprint of an object. So this is simple idea. What is it? What is that? What is class now? Class is something which describes about properties and actions of an object. So it is the class which helps us to declare that variables and methods of object. So that is quick idea about class. I hope you are clear with this. Can you please confirm in the chat box if you are clear with what is object and what is class now? Can you please confirm in the chat box? Right? So this is the idea. What is the idea? So what is object and what is class? The core features of OOP. Now, question is, how do we declare a class? In programming, everything we do that with keywords. And to declare class, we have a keyword called class. And once we know the keyword, the next thing is using syntax. We have to apply syntax. For everything, there is a syntax. To create object, we have a syntax. And to create class, we have a syntax. We have to blindly memorize syntaxes. We don't have a choice. So how do you declare a class then? This is the syntax of class. Class space class name. Inside that you have variables and functions. How to declare them, we'll talk one by one. Today, I'll try to make it so simple and easy to understand. And this is very useful and interesting session. The foundation of OOP, classes and objects. So this is the syntax of class. Something like class name, some variables and functions. We don't put variables directly in class here. I have to change this now because it will be a little confusing. Let me make it simple for you. Functions should be there, and then inside functions you might put variables. That's how we should create variables in Python. So we should have functions, and inside functions, if you want, you can add variables. So that is the idea about class. This is the syntax. Hope this is clear, friends. This is the idea about how to declare a class. Right? And this is the syntax how to declare object. And this is like a discussion about what is object. And this is discussion about what is class. Hope this is clear. So quick questions are, so what is an object means? It has properties and actions and it belongs to a real world. And what is a class? Class describes about object. So first thing in OOP is for declaring a class. So these are the steps. Let's talk about this. These are the steps to implement classes and objects. So after understanding what is class, what is object, after knowing the syntax of class and object, just remember. If you don't remember, also still it's fine. You can forget it also, no problem. Only just remember what is object, what is class. Step 1. When you are working with classes and objects, these are the steps we should follow. What is that? Step 1. First, always, if you should work with OOP, we should declare class first. Without class, you cannot expect objects because we cannot create objects without class. Maybe if you ask me why again, I have answered this number of times so far. It is class which describes about object. It is class in which we declare variables and methods of object. So point is very clear now. That is why we should declare class first and describe all the variables of object and all the functions of object. I hope you are clear with that, friends. So step one, declare a class first. And here this is the syntax. Just memorize class name. And then that functions first, because without function, we cannot add variables directly. I am talking about instance variables, not class variables like static or class variables. I'm talking about something called instance variables. We'll talk about it. I'll give very detailed discussion on each and everything. Just keep following. Okay. So this is a quick syntax. Right? You should declare class like this and then declare functions inside class and then variables inside functions. Maybe you ask me a question. Can't I declare variables outside function inside class in Python? I mean, can't we have variables directly inside class like if you are from Java or C++ or from C Sharp? So, in C++, Java and C Sharp, we can declare variables directly inside class, outside method. But in Python, it is slightly different. Yes, you can have variables inside class directly, outside functions, but they cannot be instance variables. They cannot be what? These are non-instance variables. If something is outside function and inside class, I'm very clear. Where if some variables are inside class, outside function, they are non-instance variables. Remember, again, if you ask me a question, what are instance? I'll talk about everything. But just remember this structure. So what is that? Your class name, and then your non-instance variables, which we call generally static or class variables. You can say static or class variables. Okay, they can be there directly inside class. But suppose if you want to declare any instance variables, so these are, if you want to have instance variables, they has to be inside functions. I'll give very clear picture now, how to define all that one by one. Is this clear till this, friends? You got clarity now? So this is the syntax. Okay? This is class name. Inside that you should have functions and variables, which we generally call, these are instance variables. And if you have any variables directly inside class, they are what? They are static or class variables. Remember, just remember, I'll give a detailed discussion on this. Okay, but remember this structure. Next one. This is the simple example, quick example. If you want to define a class per person, this is how we should create. And the naming standard, we follow classes for classes in Python. Naming standard. This is the naming standard. What is that? Every class name. So any class name or when you declare a class name, every word starting letter must be uppercase. So generally, this naming standard is a class name should start with so not in a class name. Okay, a class name should start with uppercase. Start with what? Start with the uppercase. This is the standard you should follow when you declare a class in Python. And every inner word starting letter should be uppercase. I'm just correcting it, okay? Should be uppercase. Meaning what? This is so. Suppose if class name is person, start of that class name should be uppercase, start letter. Okay, that is person. You can see P is uppercase. Suppose you have employee details. Now, in employee details, E starts with uppercase. You can see here. As standard says, a class name should start with uppercase. Right? And then now that's what we see here, right? For person, P is uppercase, for employee, E is uppercase. Right. Now, suppose you have another word here. In employee, you have employee details. You can see here. This is an inner word. and every inner word starting letter is uppercase here. You can see here. This is suppose if you have one more word again in this class, employee details, something like some software, just department if you mention, even in that the starting letter should be uppercase. And easy to remember this standard is each word starting letter should be uppercase. No spaces. Don't keep any spaces. It won't work. I hope this is clear, friends. This is idea about what idea about naming standard. And that is what we follow when we declare a class. You can see here P is uppercase. Why? It is a naming standard. So, and we should declare all this. We have to follow this structure to declare classes. Maybe if you ask me, still we don't know what to do and how to create classes. So if that is your question, my answer is simple. We will talk that with the examples, with some simple projects. We'll try to understand each and everything what we are discussing here. But before that, I'm just quickly giving you a overview or a high level understanding about what is class and what is object. So this is step one. What is that step one? Declaring a class. That is what we should always do when we are working with object oriented programming. And we have to follow the syntax structure, right? That's it. Next one after that. Once we create class, next step is to create object. Again, follow the syntax like this. Reference variable equal to class name. Just memorize this. Reference variable is something you can name as you like, but class name should be same as the class name which we declare. We cannot change this class name. It has to be same as your class name. But this variable, this reference variable, we can change it. So, and this is the example you can see here. So if class is person, then we create object like this. Person should be followed with parenthesis and a simple reference variable p. Assign this person method to this reference variable. And this is called object. Technically, this is object. And it is possible for us to create object only when we have a class like this. So if you have a class like this, then only we can create object here like this. So point is simple. What is it? If we should create an object, before that a class must exist. So that is very important. I hope this is clear, friends. Understood? These are the two steps. So step one is declaring class, step two creating object. You should just blindly remember these things. Okay. Next step three. Suppose what will be there inside class? Class has variables and methods or functions. Those variables can be instance variables or static or class variables. Let it be whatever it is. But as a whole, what is inside class? It might have variables. It might have functions or methods. All this. Okay. So now the question is, suppose if your class has all this, how do we access this variables and methods of a class outside that class? So that is the question. So that is step three. What is step three? How to access members of a class. This is just, I told instance members. It can be instance or it can be any other members. Accessing members of a class. So generally, one big important thing to remember, just remember, if you don't remember also nothing, you can forget also, no problem. But it's good if you remember, that's all. So generally, inside class, you can have two types of members. What is that? You can have some static or class members. And second category is instance members. Static or class, variables and methods. These things just quickly remember, that's all. Don't try to again come up with the question. Don't think about question. What is difference? why these are called static, why these are called instance, all that. I'll explain everything. For now, just remember, that's all. Observe and remember. Now, inside class, you might have two different categories of variables or methods. The first category is static variables and methods. And then the second one is instance variables and methods. Means instance methods, instance variables. Majority of the classes has this. So the purpose of OOP object itself says, right? When we talk about OOP, most of the time we have instance variables and methods. Majority of members inside class are instance variables and methods. And minority members are static variables and methods. Static variables, static methods are class variables and class methods. You got this, friends? Now the question is, how do, suppose if this is a class, you have some members inside this, and if I want to access them outside, then this is the syntax we should follow. If you want to access instance members, then we do that by using self queue. This is the syntax. Right? Maybe let me just make it simple for you, so that otherwise it might be little, what shall we say, little boring or confusing as well. So when you have instance members inside a class, the first thing is, if you want to accessing member of a class, so then the answer for that is we can access member of a class either by using access member of a class. Right? So either using this object. One approach is using object or class name. Object or class name. Now again, let me make it simple for you. So when we come to this accessing, if it is instance members and methods, let's talk about first thing, instance members. Instance members means instance variables and methods. We access instance variables and methods using object. So this one, this part, just remember, you don't need to do anything. Instance and variables and methods, we access them using object outside class. So this is one thing. Remember this example. Okay, one. And the syntax for this is, suppose if you want to access instance member of a class. So now the question is, we have two different categories. We can declare either instance members in a class or static members or class members in a class. We can have two groups here. Okay, and let's talk about this one, instance members. If you want to access instance members, then in such case, what is that we should do? We can access them using object. So how do we access them? Using object. Using object. Remember, instance members, variables, and methods can be accessed using what? Object. So the syntax for that is simple. Some reference name. So what is it? Reference name dot member name. And that member can be a variable or it can be a method. For example, assume that your program is a person program, person class. Then you created person object. So if you want to assume that there are some instance variables like name, color, or something, and methods like some set data, get data, something, just something. You don't need to understand anything. Just remember, understand, just follow me. So if I should, this is the syntax. So now finally we are very clear. If you are listening to me, you should understand one thing. Class describes about object, and while describing, we can have different categories of members. instance members and static members. And now if you want to access them outside class, if it is instance members, then we should do that using what, friends? Using object. So we use object to access instance variables and methods outside a class. Then syntax is this: reference dot member name. For example, assume that there is a variable name in person class. Then we can access that name. Suppose the name is there. We cannot call it directly. If I should call name, then I should take the help of reference. You can see that is the syntax here: reference dot member. So p dot name. That is how I should access that instance variable of a class using object. Using that reference of object. Otherwise, this p is called reference. I'll talk again. If you ask me what is reference, we'll talk. Just remember. I'll give a detailed discussion on that. What is a reference variable? What exactly it holds? But this is the syntax. This is the example. If you want to access instance variable, then that reference dot variable name. Suppose if you want to call a method, that reference dot some set data. Assume that this method is there. But now we don't have anything. Just assume. Or it can be some p dot some print data. Or anything that is there inside that class person. But this is how we should call a method. That reference dot member name. If it is variable, call it directly like this. If it is method, you can call it like this, and method should have a parenthesis always. You can see here, this bracket should be there with method. So this is a simple idea how to call instance variables and methods. I hope you are clear. So this is how we invoke or we call instance members of a class outside that class using object or reference. Hope this is clear. Suppose second thing. Suppose we know by now class has instance variables and static members or class members. Now we are very clear how to access instance members from a class. Next thing is how to access static members or class members. Maybe you can ask me a question. What is all this, Manoram? You are saying instance variables, instance members, static members, class members, all this. What is all this? This again, don't go to that level. Don't question now, because I am going to give you a detailed discussion about everything. Instance versus static, I'll talk. But if I should go to that point, we need some basic understanding. So till that time, only just remember static is this, instance is this. Otherwise, okay, class has two different things. Instance member, static members. If it is instance member, we call like this. If it is static member, we call like this. That's all. Just only have that idea. Maybe if you ask me a question, I can answer, but this is not right time, friends. Again, you get confused. So don't get into that much deeper this thing. Don't go too much deep at this level. Clear now? Step 2. What is step 2 here? Accessing. What is that? Accessing class members. If it is class member or static member, simply we access them using class name. We don't need object for class members. We access class members. Just remember these things. Don't try to understand anything. Remember, using class name. Okay, that's all. For example, assume that there is a class member A equal to 10. Then or a static variable A equal to 10. Then, unlike instance members, we don't need object for calling or accessing class members or static members. Static or class members using, so we don't need object. Right? What is that we need to access static or class members? just we can use class name. Class name is enough for us. We don't need object. Hope you are following, friends. Again, again, I'm saying, just remember, don't try to understand anything. Just follow. That's it. By the end of the today's session, I'll make sure you get a clear picture about instance variables and instance methods. I'm very sure. Static or class, I'll give clarity in the next week because that itself takes a lot of time for us to discuss. But how do you access class members? Class members are totally different from instance. Instance means we need object for them to access them outside, but class members doesn't need any object, just class name alone is enough. Suppose we have a variable, a class variable or a static variable a equal to 10 in a class. If I want to call that, suppose person class has that, okay, as a variable age equal to some 30. And this is a static variable in person class. Then if it is a static member, we don't need to create object for static members to call it outside the class. And we just use class name to call it outside the class. And the syntax example is, suppose assume that the class name is person. To call person this age of person, we can simply say that class name dot age. And same for methods, class name dot method name. This is variable, we call it with class name. If it is method, we call it class name. Anything we call this static members using class name. So we are very clear here. We are clearly saying if you just read this statement, that itself gives us clarity. What is it? We access static members using our class members using class name. If you have this clarity about all this fundamentals, then program will become very easy for you. Right. So this is the simple idea about all this steps. How do we access what is a class, what is there inside class, and then how to create object, how to access instance members, how to access static members, and what is the syntax for them. All that is discussed here. Hope this is clear for you, friends. Now the question is, now we will see a simple exam project to understand how to declare these steps, how to work with these three steps here. We are talking about steps to implement classes and objects. For now, ignore about this class members. I'm not going to focus on the static and class variables now. I'm going to focus on instance members and instance variables right now. Instance variables and methods. So we are going to work with these steps now. What are those steps? First, what is that we should do? We should declare a class. Next, create object. Next, access members of class. And syntax is clearly discussed here. If you just have listened to what we are discussing today, you should be very clear with syntaxes. Still no problem. Forget everything. We will be with while implementing project, we'll make sure everything is simple for you. So before I jump to the program, are you clear with this, friends? Are you clear with this? Can you please confirm in the chat box? Are you clear with class and object? I'm trying to again explain in detail again today. Okay, then now let us see a small example. Let us see this now. So I'm closing all this. Let me create a simple program now. What is this Python file? Now what we do is let us implement a program for what shall we take, course, or otherwise let's take a car otherwise. Okay. Anything is fine. You can take any object of your choice. Okay. Shall we take which is your best example? Do you want to take person, course, or car, or what? Anything is same. The way once you know how to implement this one for one object, this approach is same, friends. Right. So you can choose any of your choice. right? Now, let us take car. Okay, let's go with car now. First thing, we are going to implement. What is that we are going to do? I'm making it simple for you. We are going to implement a class program per class, per car. Now, let us postmortem each and everything in detail before we go and start creating a program. First thing, car is our object. Then, if we should create a class per car, what is that you should understand is what properties car has. Just identify. First thing, step one is identify what properties car has. Properties means what? So here, car has name. Let you know, car has color, car has price, car has model, something like this. So first you should identify for any object. Important thing is identify this properties. Suppose if it is, let's take another example. Suppose if it is a course, let's take example of course. Okay, then if it is a course object, then first you should identify properties of course. What properties course has? You can usually identify properties per course. Just can you please answer that in the chat box? Can you please at least what try to provide three properties per course. Please answer in the chat box. In the chat box, try to ping me three properties per course. First, identify those properties per course and please ping at least three properties per course in the chat box. I'll just make you to understand it in the live itself. Most of the groundwork I'll try to make by you only. Identify at least three properties of course and please print that three properties in the chart box. Okay, are you able to do that? Super. Now, so you can just take it as course name, course duration. Yes, you some and course price. Okay, and maybe you can add few more. Okay, if you want course ID, something like that. But three are enough for us because it is 3 or 100. It is same. If you know how to work with just 3-4 properties, it is same for 100 properties as well. First thing is in any program in OOP, when you have an object and implement a class program for that, the first thing you should do is identify properties of that identify properties of that object. So that's what you should do first. What is that you should do? Identify properties of object. Now I think by now you should be very clear. Second thing, you should know how to declare them. After doing this much of Python programming, I don't think it is difficult for you to declare these variables because these properties are nothing but variables in a program. You know how to declare name, duration, and price, right? Price, right? We don't have data types in Python. Simply what we can do for name, if it is car, we can give names like, we can declare variables like this. If it is car, name is some Audi or some bench. Okay. If it is and color, you can give something like black. Okay. And price, you can give some 1 crore or something. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then 6, 7. So model, you can take it as 2024, something like this. If you want, you can declare even model in double quotes. You can create model as a string. It's up to you. And this is how we define variables for any object. And we are already familiar with variables. So if you know how to define variables, half of your job is done for classes concept for this OOP program. Now next, suppose same thing you can do for course also. Course name equal to something like Python. Just take example of Python and then duration. This duration unknown for Manoram sessions. Okay, you can laugh a little for this. Okay, duration. Okay, take some 4 months. Right. Okay, price. So price is this is priceless. So just take some 10,000 or something. Okay. So this is simple here. You have to define properties like this, right? I hope you should be clear. So this is how you have to start working with OOP programming. You take any object. Suppose you take one more. Shall I give one more example, or already you understood this better? Just please confirm in the chat box so that I stop my this thing on this. Yes, we can add all that. Yes, definitely. So can you please confirm? Are you good till this? Do you want me to take one more example, or should I stop here? Because if you are clear, then I'll jump to the next discussion. Okay, then let's make it. Then let's move to the next one. So this is about what when you implement. There is a slight typo here. No problem. A class and program for car or any object. First, identify properties. Next one, what? Then second thing. So actions. You should identify actions for any object. So object has what already as discussed. Object has properties and actions. Now we know how to identify properties, right? Now next thing is what? Identifying methods or functions, actions. So step 2 is again among this. So next thing is actions. Every object has actions. Right, car has actions, course has actions. So generally what? So when we implement any program here, what? We should identify properties and actions. Now we identified properties for car and course, or it can be any object. It might be same approach. Now suppose, now next thing, identifying actions. Next thing is identifying actions. Actions are nothing but functions. For a car, generally, you have these actions, move forward, move backward. These are general functions, are general actions. But in programming, we don't need them. We don't need move forward or backward, all this. But what we need, we declare this properties, right? Now we should declare them inside your car class. To declare this properties or variables inside car class, we need one method. What actions we need? One method to declare this variables of car. One method to print this variables of car. So we are going very slow. This is very basic program. Later on, we can add some business logic and some mathematical implementations. All that if you want, you can add, no problem. But I'm just giving you a simple idea how to create a simple class and object program. For that, first we should understand how to implement class. Right. Now, what actions we need now? Actions means functions. So we have identified properties now. To declare these properties, we need one method. To declare these variables, we need one method. To print these variables, we need one method. So simple. So one method. Now what is that we need? We need to add actions, right? So actions means what? We need to add. Adding actions means add methods to a class. Methods to a class. I'm just making it simple for you. How do you add? How many methods are needed? One method to declare variables of or to add variables. Maybe the exact word is to add variables of a object. and one method to print variables of object. So how many methods we need altogether? We need two methods to print. That object can be car, it can be course, it can be person, it can be anything, friends. Customer, it can be anything. So this is how you have to break down your class program. You have to break down that into two parts, this declaring variables and declaring methods. Or adding variables to class and adding methods to class. We have to break down like this. And the very important thing is adding variables, because variables is data of a class. This is very important. Of course, methods are also important, but if you need methods to implement them on this data. So the very important thing in OOP is data. Once you have data, then you can have methods. These methods will work on this data. I hope this is clear by now. So this is how we have to break down your program. Right? Finally, we understood what we should do with class. Identify properties first and then identify actions. Add these properties to a class, add these actions to a class. But in if it is Java, or if it is C++, or if it is C#, you can declare variables first and then you can declare methods later. That facility is there in other languages, but in Python, if you should declare variables of car, then before that we should declare one method first inside this car class. So I'll show you now. Let's go to the implementation. Okay. Similarly, same thing for course if you. So for course also, what is that? We can add actions. That actions can be, for now, just one method to add variables of object and one method to print variables of object. That's all. And we are focusing right now. For now, all our discussion is on instance variables and methods. As of now, you can just think we are focusing, concentrating on. You can assume these variables and methods as instance members. Right now, shall we start? Shall we go and implement one program for class and object? Okay, let us do that now. So what you do? Create one car demo. What is that? Car demo. Sorry, so this is car demo. Right now, what do we do right now? I think in person yesterday I have implemented car, no problem. That is fine. So now first thing, what is that you should do? Identify car properties. You know now what are car properties? Car name, color, and then price. Just take these three variables. And methods are what? You can take two methods. What are those two methods? One method to initialize or to declare variables. So that is, you can name this method as set data or input data, or you can name as you like. Give some meaningful names to methods. First, we need method more than variables. Already we are familiar with functions. You know how to create function. Only thing is earlier we declared functions directly, but the same function now we just put it in a class. That's all. That is the only difference. So first declare method here. One method to declare these variables. That is set data. As name says, set data means you can clearly understand with name, method name. This is used to set some values to object. Another one, what you can take it as another method as a print data. Print data prints the data of object. Okay. So this is the simple idea. Now let's start creating a program. So we are creating a program. We are following the steps now. What are those steps? We see that three steps, right? Steps to implement classes and objects. Implement a class program. Simply speaking. What is that class here? Car. Okay. Now step one, what is that we should do? Step one is always what? Creating the class. Without class, we cannot do anything in OOP. If you should create even object, class must exist. So what we do now? Step one, create a class. How do you create class? Follow the syntax. See, this is all we are just blindly following syntax. We don't have a choice. And for this, we don't need to be intelligent. Just understanding, memorizing syntax is what we need. So now I should create a class for car. Then how do I create class car? Just we should use keyword. Keyword is always in lowercase and then that class name car, colon. I hope you are clear now. This is how we declare a class. Now I should declare all these variables of car. And how do I do that? I cannot do it directly. For that, I need a method. I should declare a method. Inside that method, I can declare these variables. And all these are instance members. Okay, what are all this? All these are instance members. We are declaring them as instance members. Then, first thing, what is that? If I should declare variables, we cannot do it directly in Python like how we do in Java or C++. First, we should declare a method first. You know how to declare method, right? That def we should start and then method name. That name you can give any meaningful name. I give set data because I am trying to declare data and assign some value. So that's why I named as set data or input data, right? Something like that. And parentheses. As you declare a method inside class, and this is instance method. So remember, observe this carefully. So this instance method should have the self keyword by default in this parenthesis. What is it? If you declare any method inside a class, if you declare outside directly, then they are normal functions. But now you are declaring them inside class. Then inside class, these methods, right? You are declaring a method, right? If it is instance method, that instance method must and should have this self keyword. So this is what method? This is an instance method. What is it? Instance method. How can we say it is instance method? By looking at this self keyword in the parenthesis, you can easily identify this is an instance method. Instance means object. These methods belong to object. Maybe you can ask me how we didn't get that point, Manoram. I'll explain that. We'll do a postmortem of program. Postmortem is step-by-step analysis of everything we declare in the program. Then you get a clear idea what is object, why we call them as object methods, or what is instance method, what is instance variable, why we are calling them as instance variables or methods. Everything we get a clear picture. But for now, remember, there is no harm in remembering. Why? Just remember, okay, if any method has some self like this, then they are instance methods. This is not difficult to remember, right? So this is how we should declare instance method. And inside this, we declare instance variables. What variables? So this is an instance method. If you should declare variables for this for object, these acts as instance variables, and this must be declared inside instance method. Now, how do you declare? Again, any instance variable should have a prefix. Any instance variable should have a prefix self here. Self. I just declare, then you understand. Now, how should I declare that name color? Suppose the name is there, and then color is there, and then price is there. Okay. How do you declare it? Do you declare directly like inside this method name equal to some bench? Okay. So color equal, let me just show you. Color equal to some black. Okay. So and then price equal to some 1 lakh, something like. Just don't worry about what is that digits. Leave it like that. Just this is the price. Do you think we declare variables like directly like this inside class, inside method? Sorry. Then these are local variables. These are not instance members. If you want to make them as instance members, properties of car, if you want to make them as properties of car, then these variables should be declared with the self keyword. Which keyword? Self keyword. Self dot name. This is how we should define them. Okay. So you are going to get a very, very detailed discussion. Self dot color. Self dot price. This is how we should define. What is it, friends? Instance members. Suppose you don't have self. You can see I am removing self. These are not instance members. They don't belong to object. These are local variables. What is it? Local variables. Means these are something specific to this method internally. This doesn't belong to object. This doesn't belong to object and these are local members. Maybe you can ask me a question. So how do I know these belongs to object or these are local members? I will do a postmortem. Then you get a clear idea. Till then, just remember. But what is that? If we should declare this variables as instance variables or this properties as instance members, then we should suffix each of this with the which keyword? Self keyword. You can see here self keyword, self keyword. Now, by looking at them, you can understand these variables are instance variables and this method or function is instance function or instance method. Now the question is, how do you recognize if a method is instance method, if a variable is instance variable in Python inside a class? Usually we can't declare them outside class, not possible. Suppose you copy this and put it directly outside, then you get an error, no doubt about it. And what did I do? I just defined a set data and self keyword here, and I am trying to now you see, just let it be like that. Now what do you do? Just call set data method directly. Okay. And just run it. Let's see what happens. So this set data, like we are calling it directly. It won't call this method. Don't think. I'm just giving a quick idea. What is it? We cannot declare instance methods, instance variables directly outside class. It's not possible. These members should be declared inside class. Remember these things. Right click and just try to run this. And you get an error. What is that? Set data missing one required positional argument self. Where do I pass this self from? If it is a class, I can do something. If you just directly put something outside like this, and if it is expecting some parameter for this self, means this is a parameterized method, right? It is expecting some value. Suppose for that self you pass some 10. It doesn't act as a keyword here. Self don't act as a keyword, but in fact it acts as some variable. That's all. Now I try to run this. Now you still what? You can see here self dot name equal to bench. It is saying something. So this is altogether you can see again it's showing here. Means this approach like declaring a method with self and declaring variables with self, it's not possible outside class. Just want to make sure it's clear for you. Right? So maybe if you have this question, then the answer is don't think about declaring instance variables and instance methods and variables outside class. It's not possible. Okay. This has to be inside a class. And next question is, how do you recognize these are instance variables and methods? It's very clear. We had a very detailed discussion. If any variable is declared with self, these are instance variables. If any method is declared with self inside a class, again, all these are inside a class only. Whatever we discussed right now, assume that they are part of class. So if a method, if you see any method with self, it is instance method. If you see any method with self, any variable with self, these are instance variables. I hope this is clear, friends. So this is the idea. So now these are all what again? These are all. This is an instance variable, or otherwise simply you can just add like this. As a whole, you can put one comment on top and say these are what? Instance variables. Why instance? Because We declare them with self, and these belongs to object. This variables, these methods, all this belongs to object. What is it, friends? All this belongs to object. Again, you can ask me a question. We didn't understand belonging to object means what? That I will give you a clarity. For now, remember. Now we have created set data. Finally, we just done with one this thing, implementing one method to declare variables of class, instance variables of class. Now one method to print instance variables of class. So how do you declare? Simple. You know how functions is not new for you. Only thing is all this technicalities what we discussed right now is new. This class thing, this self thing. These are something new for us. This instance variables, instance methods, class variables, static variables, all these are new. That variable is not new, but that technical thing we are adding here is new for us. I hope you are clear. So I'll give very detailed analysis. Just remember. For now, I think you should be clear till this, right, friends? So one method to declare and initialize instance variables. We declared instance variables and initialize. One method now to print them. Print the data. You can call print car or print data, anything is fine. You can see when you declare a method inside class, automatically this ID is adding self to that. By that you should understand majority of the members inside class usually they are instance type. Instance variables are instance methods. That's why by default when you declare a method, this ID is automatically adding self to that method. Got it now? So that's the idea. Now what shall we do now? If you don't use this self, this print data method cannot access these variables directly. It cannot call them directly. Okay. Cannot. Maybe if you ask me, I'll talk about it. Indirectly, we can do that. If you don't use this self is important. Means self is something access to instance members. Okay. Make sure all instance methods has self keyword in the parentheses. Right. Now print data. What is that we should do now? Print of the name is. You can similarly you can create any class friends. Now I have done for car. You can do it for bus or you can do it for car. I mean some course or anything. The name is okay. Dot format. What you can do? Self dot name. Okay. I'm taking little more time today. Can you please confirm if it is okay for you, friends? I'm extending a little today. Is that fine? Name is, and then these are all simple, right? You can just change this variable names, right? The color is, and the price is. Okay. And here just change this variable names. Self dot color, self dot price. Okay, we did implement a class program. You can see one method to declare and initialize instance variables, and one method. This is also instance method. Now, if I ask this question, you can easily answer. How do you recognize instance variables and methods in a Python class? You can easily answer this question. Answer is what? By if you see self with a method or self with a variable, these are instance members. Blindly, you can say that what members are this? These are instance members. I hope this is clear. Right. So another thing, for example, it's a quick question like this is a general question. It's outside a real world example. Suppose you go to any restaurant. So at the door, you have that you have service person. You can see there. By looking at his dress code, you can easily understand he's the doorman. He helps us to open and close door. That uniform itself says. Is that clear? Suppose you go to your hotel again, same example. If you look at the server, By looking at that dress code again, you can easily recognize that person is a server, helps us to serve some food. I hope this is clear. They have some special dress code. Similarly, instance members and methods in Python has some special keyword followed with them, used with them. What is that keyword? Self keyword. By looking at that, you can easily understand. Now, this is also an instance method. Maybe you can ask me, what is it? I'll explain. I told you, right? For now, remember, I'll give, what is it? A detailed postmortem. Instance method to print the car data. That's all. Now, we should be fine. Step one is done. We have created a class. What is that now? Suppose if you should access these methods outside class. See, if you are accessing them inside same class, it is of no help for us. Once we declare certain things inside a class, we should be able to call them somewhere outside that class. Is my point clear? If you suppose you have gone to a restaurant, they prepared food, and if the internal people eat, nothing is useful for them. Someone from external should come, or otherwise they have to supply to outside to some other people. Then only they earn money. Similarly, in programming, in a class or anything, if you declare something, this members has to be used outside somewhere. Right? So now if I should access this members outside, this methods are variables, then what is that I should do? You know very well by now. What is that? We should step two is if I should do that, I should create an object for this class. So if I should access this members, this methods are variables, these functions are variables, instance methods outside class. What is that I should do, friends? I should create an object for that class. Class call. How do I create? Just blindly I am not doing, I'm not intelligent or clever here. I'm following syntax. For that, we don't need any intelligence, friends. What is that we need? We just need syntax. What is that syntax? Reference name. That reference name is your choice for car class. This is your car class. Okay. Right side, you know the syntax, right? This is the syntax we had discussed. This is the syntax. Reference name, reference variable equal to class. So this variable name is your choice. You can name as you like, but this class name should be same as you declared in the program. This should not change. So declare class at right side. This should be at right side. If you just declare like this, it's not helpful. Actually, this is object. If you ask me, this is object. But this is to be assigned to some variable. How? Something like car equal to car. Then you don't get confused. You can ask a question. Both are same. Then how do I differentiate between these two? This is lowercase. This is uppercase. This is a standard way of creating objects in real time. To recognize car, you create your reference as car only, but there is a slight change in the case because Python is case sensitive, right? Any small change in cases treats them differently. Now we created an object for car. Oh, okay, step two is done. Then how do I access these methods? If I first thing we should call set data. Why? Because all your variables are in set data, and if this variable should be created for object, then this method should be called first. Don't call print data. First call set data. Why set data means technically and logically this is something we should call first. All our variables are declared inside this. That's why we should all our data is inside set data. So that's why we should call this first. So how do you call? Again syntax. As this is instance member, any instance member we call it with object. That means reference of object. Maybe in fact the exact point is reference of object. What is the syntax to call access instance members? You can see here. Accessing. You can see here. Accessing instance variables and methods. Instance variables and methods. We access them using object outside class. So that is syntax is reference dot member. Suppose now I want to call set data. Then how do I call step 3? Step 3 is accessing members of accessing instance. I'm using word instance here because we are accessing instance members only. And in this class, we don't have any other static or class variables. All this is completely instance as of now. This variables, this methods, everything. Right now, step 3, accessing instance members of a class. Which class car? How do we do that? If we should access these members, before that, this object must exist. Remember this. Maybe if you don't create object, it is impossible to call these members outside class. Object is a gateway for us to access this instance members and methods. And if you don't create object, there is no room for this instance variables or methods to exist. Remember my statement. There is no room. Room in sense you can treat it as a room in your home. No problem. There is no room for what? Your instance variables and instance methods. When if we don't create object, remember this friends, if you don't create object, we never have a room for these guys. That's why should create object for a class. If we should access this instance variables or methods outside. Now I am done. Then again, another important point. If this instance variables must exist, before that, this method should be called. Again, if you don't call this set data, these variables never exist. If this should exist, this should come alive, then this method should be called. Then how do you do that? Simple. Follow the syntax. See, all this is, I'm not doing anything great here. I just learned syntaxes. That's all. Reference dot member name. What is that member here? Set data. Just follow that. Right here, how do I call this set data? Simply that reference is car dot. You can see when I say that reference, it shows all members inside that car class. This variables name, color, price, and then this method set data and print data. But don't try to call name directly. Now, if you call name, it won't work. See, let me just show you. If I print this as I am seeing name, I try to call name directly. And let me just run this and show you what happens now. And this gives you a clear picture. You can see now it is saying an error. What is error? Attribute error. I try to call car name. That name is there inside car class, no doubt, inside set data method. But it is saying attribute error. Why? Car object has no attribute name. Why this error now? I told very clearly just few minutes back, friends. Without calling this method set data, there is no chance for these variables existing. I hope this is clear, friends. Means what? If we should have these variables alive, exist, then before we call them, what is that you should do? At least for one time, you should call this method set data. At least for one time. Maybe if you want, you can call multiple times. That's a different thing. But at least once in the lifetime of car object, we should call this method once. Then automatically this variables exist. So now what shall I do now? If I want that data exist or if I want that data created, then I should call this method set data. Now everything is in place. Now you can call this. Now you can say print of car.name. This works. And you say set data, this method is called and automatically all these variables are created inside object or for object. Now if I call name, it will work now. You can see after calling set data, you don't get error. You can see bench now. But if I don't call this set data and try to call name directly, you can see that attribute error. Why? Because if this variable should get created for object, this method should be called. And without calling method, there is no chance for these variables to exist. I hope this is clear. I think I am very clear here in this discussion. So that is the idea. So what is that you should do now? You got clarity? Right. Next one. Finally, once you call set data, then you can call print data. Why? This data is now created and available in the object. This data resides inside object. Remember, again, if you ask me what is that object, I'll talk about it. I'll do a postmortem in the next weekend sessions. Right now, okay, we call set data, and this instance members are created. This data is created, and this exists now. Now we can call print data. How? Simply same way how we call set data. Simply that reference dot print data. Just call that. Then this data gets printed. This when you call this method, automatically all that variables get printed from this. All this instance variables get printed from core object. Which object? From core object. I hope you are clear. Now right click and then run this, and you can see right all that data from this core object. That name and color and price. You can see all this. And this is a simple OOP program, a class program. And this is what you have to follow. How to first we should define class, and then instance variables or methods or any other members. But in majority of the cases, it would be instance variables and instance methods and variables. And in minority cases, it will be static or class members. But now our focus is concentration is on instance members. So this is how we should create a class with all this data and methods. Then we should create object. Then we should call this methods using reference of object like this. This is and this is same. Now you do any program for any object. The steps are same. Hope this is clear. I hope you should very clear with the concept of object and class. But there are so many gray areas, unknown areas. What is that? Now I am saying from the beginning onwards, object, object, object. Now you should see that practically. What is this object? Car is what will be there inside core object, and why we are calling these methods on core object. So that we understand if you do a postmortem. That we do in next session. Postmortem is thorough analysis. That's all, friends. So we do dissection of this program in next week. And hope you are clear now. Maybe you can just test this code once. And then maybe get some idea. Next week, we'll get a detailed discussion. Hope you are clear now. Don't miss next week's session, friends. Because these fundamental sessions are very important. At least we get what is class, what is object, all this stuff. Clear now? So finally, we are done with a very good session today. So I'm